Thank you for joining us and welcome back to another Angle. I'm your host, Peter Monahan. Here's what happened in Tommie sports over the past 2 weeks. The men's basketball team is on a 7-game winning streak and has secured the top spot in the MIAC and a playoff bid. This includes a buzzer beater by senior point guard Grant Schaefer to secure a win over Gustavus last Wednesday. They have 5 games remaining in the regular season, and their next home matchup will be on Saturday against the Knights of Carleton. The women's basketball team remains undefeated after knocking off Gustavus in a battle of the unbeatens last Wednesday. Caitlin Langer scored 32 points and collected 10 rebounds in the Tommie's 75-69 win over the Gusties. They are ranked first in the MIAC and third nationally with 4 games remaining in regular season play. The men and women's tennis team kicked off the 2017 season this weekend with a matchup against St. Mary's on Sunday. Both teams swept the Cardinals with 9-0 wins. The men will play at home this Sunday against Cornell College, and the women will play Friday the 17th against Bethel. The swim and dive team crossed I-94 this weekend to participate in the Minnesota Challenge at the University of Minnesota. They had a strong showing amongst a number of MIAC teams and also some Division I competition. The track and field team had a strong showing over the weekend. The men's team won the Wartburg Indoor Select, and the women's team came in third. Sophomore Nick Spann had a big meet, winning the triple jump, coming in second to his teammate Michael Witchen in the long jump, and posted a personal best in the 4x400 relay. The team will be back home on Friday hosting the UST Showcase. The men's hockey team wrapped up a doubleheader against Concordia Moorhead this past weekend. They were beaten in overtime 5-4 in the first game, but bounced back the next night, winning 5-0 and scoring 3 goals in the final 6 minutes. They remain first in the MIAC with 4 games left in the regular season. The women's hockey team traveled to Concordia Moorhead this weekend for a doubleheader with the Cobbers. The Tommies won the first of 2 games 1-0, but were defeated in the second game 5-4. They are currently ranked 5th in the MIAC with 4 games remaining. They will face MIAC frontrunners Augsburg this weekend in a doubleheader on Friday and Saturday. And now here to discuss the men's and women's hockey team, we have analysts Anthony Mahady and Andre Gobert. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for
Now,
having
Anthony, let's start off with talking about the St. Thomas men's team. How essential will penalties and power plays be in the closing moments of the season and against Augsburg this weekend?
Well, they're going to be huge, Peter. Coming down the stretch, as we talked about in different sports, we want both teams to make every chance they have, every opportunity they have to try to come and collect those so they can score those much-needed points or score those much-needed goals. The Tommies on the power play, they only have 12 power play goals out of 90 opportunities. So that's a 13.3% success rate, and that's 8th out of 9 in the MIAC. So not very good. And coming into against Augsburg this weekend, which is a huge matchup in the MIAC standings, Augsburg is much better on the power play. They have a 19.8% success rate, which is 4th in the MIAC, and their penalty kill is 88.6%. So penalties are going to be huge because St. Thomas, with guys like Ben Vikic and Ben Jensch and Derek Olmshank, love to hit, love to be physical, but if they keep it clean and stay out of the penalty box, I think they have a good chance of winning the game this weekend.
Yeah, and Anthony, just going off of what your thoughts right there, is Augsburg's a physical team, St. Thomas is a physical team. We're going to have to pretend that this game isn't going to come without a few hits. And so it's going to be just kind of this sort of clear kind of, they need to make sure that their hits are clean, that they're watching the way they're skating, that their stick is kept in check. And St. Thomas is a team that does well on 5-on-5. They're a very offensive team. Thomas Williams has had a phenomenal year, as we talked about. Olmstek as well, Vikic. Yeah, and there's a lot of big St. Thomas offensive players. But for them to really make a difference in this sort of game is just making sure Augsburg doesn't get those power play goals. And I think that that's ultimately going to come down to that big factor, because when they're down a man, they're not what they are when it's 5-on-5.
And Anthony, how good have the St. Thomas goalies really been this season? And what do they need to keep doing to ensure that their success continues?
Well, Ben Myers has had flashes of greatness. He's been the stud for St. Thomas all season. There was a couple times when St. Thomas tried out a bunch of different goalies, like a couple game span in the middle of the season, but Ben Myers has really established himself as the guy for the Tommies, and not quite so with Augsburg this year. Augsburg has had 2 goalies, Nick Schmidt and Jordan Coffer, that they've kind of bounced back and forth between. Schmidt only playing in 10 games and Coffer in 12 games, but recently it's been the Coffer show. It's been all about Jordan Coffer. He played a lot of games, a lot of minutes, 2 shootouts this past weekend, and all 3 goalies have a very good save percentage. Ben Myers, .928, and Jordan Coffer, .912. So, I mean, very good. They don't give up more than 2 goals a game. Usually that's around their average. And they're fairly good goaltenders, and it's tough to beat for both teams. But Jordan Crawford, we'll have to see if fatigue comes into play or if he's had enough time. I mean, he's played a lot of minutes in the last couple weeks, and Ben Myers taking a beating against Concordia the first day going into overtime. So if Ben Myers can step up, I mean, he's very, very flashy, has a lot of streaks of greatness. He can be really good, like with the shutout against St. John's, or he can give up 5 goals against Concordia. So it'll be interesting to see which Ben Myers and which Jordan Crawford show up for this matchup this weekend.
Yeah, and just kind of going a little bit more towards, Ben Myers, I think that when I grew up playing hockey. I was a goalie. And, watching him is that he's a talented goalie. He's definitely got, a lot of skill with him. He definitely filled in big shoes from last year and this year. He replaced, when we saw part of last year, he had to replace one of their better seniors leaving, and he came and stepped it up. And now this year, just kind of the next year, it's been, like what Anthony says, it's kind of here and there. We see great performances one night, we saw great performance another night. When we saw him that weekend against St. John's, he won MIAC Player of the Week honors, and we saw that he shows flashes of greatness when he's against a team and he's hot, like you can't score on him. He's unstoppable. But when his defense is breaking down around him, he'll let up a few rebounds here and there, gets a couple goals off of backdoors. He'll get in his head. And that's, I think, the biggest thing he has to avoid for the Miacs moving forward is not let the pressure get to his head. And if he lets that pressure get to his head, I think that is what is going to cause a lot of breakdowns on defense and just in the net in general. But I think that, he has a team around him. He has a team that can score. He has a defense that will clear out those rebounds if he leaves them if they're in reasonable places. And his job should be to control the game with what he's got. And if he can do that in St. Thomas's Miacs thing, I think that he's going to play very well.
And we will now step aside for a short commercial break, and we will be back to discuss the women's hockey team. Hello, and welcome back to Another Angle. I'm your host, Peter Monahan, alongside Anthony Mahady and Andre Gobert. Now, moving on, the St. Thomas women's team take on the first-ranked Augies this weekend. So, Andre, the Augies lead the MIAC in goals against average, only allowing 1.38 goals per game. What is St. Thomas going to have to do to get by arguably the best defense in the MIAC?
So the biggest thing that St. Thomas can have to do is just make sure Augsburg's defense is uncomfortable. Just looking at St. Thomas this year, they've been taking a ton of shots throughout the year. They've averaged a lot more shots than their opponents. They're averaging around 35 shots compared to Augsburg, who averages around 20. To their opponents in the conference, it average around 28. And just kind of going off of that, but they haven't been scoring a lot this year. And so the biggest thing that they'll have to do is keep Augsburg's defense uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree, Andre. And like with quick passes and trying to get that backdoor shot instead of just taking shots from the point every single time, because I think sometimes the women tend to stay back and tend to not get those great passes down low. They're a little slow offensively, and if they can keep the defense uncomfortable, like you said, with those quick passes, circling constantly towards the net, not just Catherine Larson, but everyone else, so they can get that little tip in or that little backdoor goal, I think they're going to have a great chance this weekend.
Yeah, and also just to kind of add one less little thought to that, in women's hockey, it's a lot more limited than in men's hockey in terms of physicality and what you can and can't do, and so that's part of the thing as well. But just kind of that big thing is just spread it out. Don't just sit in front of the net and just expect that you're going to find something open. Just keep moving around and keep looking for an open shot.
And Andre, what is St. Thomas's biggest advantage over Augsburg, and how can they utilize it this weekend?
So St. Thomas's biggest advantage that they have coming into this game is the fact that their power play goal conversion percentage is actually better than Augsburg. Just St. Thomas has a 20% power play goal conversion, which is really good for a team that has had issues scoring. St. Thomas this year, as a team, has lost a lot of really close games that were within 1 and 2 goals. And so the biggest thing they're going to have to do is when they get their power play opportunities, get Augsburg, capitalize on it. Use that extra woman on the ice to get that goal, to execute, to happen. Because as we talked about, this great Augsburg defense, they may not. It'll be really tough to get that opportunity on 5-on-5, but having that 5-on-4 advantage will allow them to break that defense down.
Well, that's exactly right. And Andre, it seems when I'm watching these games for the St. Thomas women that it's a completely different offense from 5-on-5 to 5-on-4. They seem so much more comfortable, so much more confident when they're on that power play. And when you have the line of Schwartzman, Tabeka, Zarembinski, and Larson out there, I mean, that's almost unstoppable. Those are the people you want on the ice to score, to put your team ahead, and you got to take advantage of those opportunities.
Right, and that's also a big thing as well. But also at the same time, St. Thomas, we talked a lot about their big, we talk about Zarembinski, Schwartzman, Larson, a lot of key players from last year, along with Captain Allison Borgstrom, just Heidi Hanua, a lot of players that we saw from last year for a team that won the MIAC and a team that went to the national championship. They were a much younger team this year. They're going to go against a pretty veteran Augsburg team, a team that's had success all year. Augsburg has a great offensive players in Colleen Noss and Bridget Wagner, and just kind of that focus is that they're just going to really have, they're just going to have to find that comfortability in playing against these great players on the power play.
Well, thank you for your analysis, Andre, Anthony. Thank you for joining us on Another Angle here on the Tommie Sports Network. We will be back in 2 weeks for more Tommie Sports. Until then, tune into our live broadcasts, and we will see you next time on Another Angle.